Uh, And before we start the meeting, there are a few points of information that I wish to share with all of you. The committee was asked to review the costs and revenues of operating the town and village as one entity to determine if there were tax savings that would warrant proceeding. We chose to develop an analysis of what the costs would have been in 2011 if there was a merged government. And therefore define the savings, or more importantly, the impact on taxes. Other viable approaches could have been used, but this was the one chosen. If the boards choose to continue on this project, a yearly budget for the proposed start year of merger must be developed, and this budget must consider the impacts of retirement rates going up 15 to 20% a year, plus medical insurance rates rising 10 to 15%, community appraised value, and other impacts on revenue and expenses. Any employee reductions will reduce the actual savings even more because of the rising individual employee costs. Two, it has been pointed out that the sum totals of the figures do not agree. This, I believe, is true. However, the real concern is the difference in the tax rates. And for this, I took, as identified in the report, the total expenses reported in the filed budgets and adjusted the costs and revenues as reflected in our review. The totals in the charts were not used. Also, as an even greater potential impact was the way the village and town handled expenses and committed income, but not paid or received at the end of the year. They handle them differently. The village sets up an encumbered amount for expenses and also for income. However, the town just identifies the amount due and the amount incurred per fund, not by line item, but by fund. And in addition, you almost, when you're doing the town, you must look at the previous year's figures in the town to determine the true income and expense in the year. In fact, for example, you may have accounts receivable of $100,000 this year, and next year you've got $50,000. Well, really, there's an additional $50,000 of expenses that you've got to address. That would not be showing up on this report. There are also adjustments that had to be made since the village operating year is June through May, and the town's January through December. This was very evident when looking at the fire expense. The town paid the village, and then looking at what the village received. When we recognized the figures were not similar, therefore the tax rate comparison of the town rate for fire was added, but money received from the town is not in the spreadsheet. There also may be similar instances that have not been identified. It is our intent in this meeting and in the future meetings we're going to have with those present or submitting in writing specific questions or comments and review those. The committee also may make reductions or increases on their own in projection savings or income, or as a result of those comments of those outside the committee. Our desire is to provide the town and village boards the best judgment we can on what the budget and the tax rate impacts are if there is one government for our community. And we welcome your input. Our review tonight will be about all revenues and a section of the expense covering town and village government bodies and the courts. And with that, I would like to, the first chart that we will be looking at is up here, and it's got the revenues. And once again, if you're not familiar with these charts, let me try to briefly explain them. This is the village actuals for 2011. This is the town's actuals for 2011. without the adjustments, once again, without the adjustments for accounts receivable and accounts payable in the town. We did the adjustments on what the cost would be here, and then when I figured out the rates, I used that data, and in the report that we made to the board, how those tax rates were determined was included. And if anybody needs copies of those, I'm glad to provide them. This is the combined, and this was what we indicated would be for one government. Now, we'll cover the changes and adjustments that we made and suggested, and we'll receive inputs from the board and from things, whether this is reasonable, whether it should be higher, or whether it should be lower. Okay? The first thing was the gross utilities tax. The village gets $66,250 in 2011, the gross utilities tax. If we're a town, a village-wide community, that utilities tax would also be extended to all the properties, not not-for-profit properties, but all regular properties in the town, and that's on, correct me if I'm wrong, Sally, that's on electricity mainly, and fuel oil, electricity and gas.
Telephone.
Right? What?
Telephone.
And telephone and,
Yeah.
and that. It is not on cable though, right?
And towns can't collect it.
Towns can't collect it, so that would be added to that. It would be an increase to the residents of the town. However, as you can see, it's only $66,250 for the village. We doubled it. It does not, this, and we discussed this the other day, and SUNY, for example, all the costs of that type of service, SUNY is not taxed, and therefore, this may be a little bit too low.
Well, it is too low.
It is too low, yes, okay, because
we only doubled it, but the village of New Paltz only represents 26% of the tax levy of the entire
yeah,
town.
but some of that's vacant property, some of that's
Right,
in,
so we
so
doubled
you
it.
shouldn't multiply it by 4, okay?
No, but
we multiply 2, maybe we should do this by what, 2.5%? Okay, so all right. So we're going to increase that to 2.5 from 2, okay? Now, this snow removal fees is increased slightly because the there are some if you don't shovel the sidewalks in the village does it and charges, and there are a few village sidewalks, and that's been added to that. Okay, outside the village, there are some town sidewalks through the thing. There is landfill revenues. Merger eliminates payment from the village to the town of $2,000. And I think one of the things, and I went back and looked, and we want to make a note of this, okay? And that is that that's an expense that should be removed. And I don't think we removed it. When we get to doing the expenses, okay, we eliminated it here. We want to remove those expenses. And I don't think we did it, okay? We'd have to check. I don't think we did, okay? Okay? This is the snow removal fees. Why did we increase that?
Which?
We increased this would be increased revenue for $18,000 for snow removal fees?
The interest and earnings?
No, it's just snow removal fees. Oh, this is landfill.
Right.
This was expanded snow removal there. Why did we change this snow removal fields here? Do you have any? I can't remember why we did that.
We expanded it. I think this is actually the sidewalks.
Well, one of these things. This is says
Those
it
are
created.
the fines, I think.
What?
I think
That's
one is.
fines?
Yeah.
And this is the cost of the remove for expanding, okay,
But
this is
I
fines.
think Susan.
This is fines, okay, this is fines up here?
Isn't that what it is?
Okay.
Yeah. All right, that says yes.
Huh?
I think so, yeah. I think that's
Alright.
what we did, you know, I don't have my notes.
Is
but
that too high?
When we put it in there, we discussed it, and we felt that it was a reasonable figure at the time, Dave. I don't have my notes.
No, that's okay, that's all
But
right.
I know we had a long
You know,
discussion about it,
Right.
and we decided that there were all kinds of figures that were given, and we decided that this was the most reasonable based upon the information that we had obtained at the time from the various places, and the projection of this going forward in the same as the town doing the same thing the village does in terms of people who don't remove their snow. So I think that's how we came up with the figure, and I believe we decided it was unanimously a reasonable figure.
Okay, all right. Now,
To
yes,
hold our questions or?
sure, anytime,
They're
Andrew.
very basic, I'm sorry, but I'm like just.
Okay, fine,
Snow removal fees.
yes.
It's not all fines. It's snow, it's whatever it costs to remove snow.
If you don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but my
Well, I
understanding
do
is
understand that there are fines.
there are
If you
fines, but
don't
there's
show
also,
your
if you
sidewalk.
don't remove your snow, the
There's the
town
fee.
comes in and removes it for you and collects the money for the snow removal. Therefore, that's an offset to the people who, have to remove the, so in other words, the cost is, let's say, $50 to have the guy come out and plow your snow away, and we turn around, and the village turns around and charges you $100 for us having to do it, it's an offset to that $50.
I think also in the town, it might include if you are parked where you shouldn't, you know, you don't move your car.
And you get a fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
And
the
also-
village pays, the village collects $15,000 worth of.
according to the,
According to the budget in 2011, that's
budget.
what they did, yeah. So
That's what they
there are two aspects of this. There's one question, you know, they charge you for removing the snow if you didn't remove it, and number two, they fine you on top of it. Am I right about that?
And it's
That's our-
only a village, it's in the snow removal fees, it's only a village
Yeah.
revenue.
Yeah. And it's, both of them are only village residents.
it's based on 2011.
Yeah.
There's no snow last year.
No, that, it was, we had to
Andrea,
use a starting point, we used 2011.
Took the actual figures,
Yeah.
so that's what the village says they got.
This is what, the town and village gave us a piece of paper that said, this is what we got, and that was our
You know,
starting
I think this is a duplication, and I'm gonna scratch this.
You wanna check it?
I think I wanna scratch that.
Your codes are different,
Well, I know that, but you see, there is snow removal fees here in the village and the
that's town,
okay?
that's sidewalks and things.
There are snow removal fees here, okay?
Let's check it.
Well,
So I think we should, I think that should be, you know, and
But
look at it back
Dave,
and
if I
think.
may suggest, I think, right, we should make a note of it, but I personally wanna go back and see what our
Fine, all right.
discussion records say before we remove something, and have a figure there that really
Okay,
belongs and shouldn't,
eight,
be, you know, or
one,
shouldn't be.
two,
But, you know,
five,
it's a question
five.
raised, we don't have the answer, I said, I didn't bring my notes,
Right.
which I apologize for, but I thought everything was gonna be cut and
Yeah.
dry, but we really, if it's right, we'll cut it. You know, we'll, at the next meeting, we'll say, yeah, we looked this up and it's not.
All right,
But until we
okay.
actually go back to our discussion notes, I don't think we should tell anybody. we looked
Okay,
at it.
all right, okay,
No,
I
just that
just
we're
think
gonna
that's
look
a
into it.
question, okay? I think that maybe there's a duplication here.
Okay,
But
it could
that's
be.
fine.
Different codes,
Yeah, I understand that, Sally, I understand that, but,
we'll check.
since only one of them has, only village expense, and the other one has town and village expense, I wonder whether we got a look into
Figure it
it, okay? Licenses, today, the village requires garbage haulers to, have a license, and they charge them for that license. And expanding it to the village, we estimated that would increase it by $1,400. This down here is state aid. Payment to the village is a higher rate. Villages do get a higher rate than towns. At least that has been the history. Now, one of the things that's not on here, and I'm recommending to the committee, is that we specifically know, it's in the law, that if you merge, the community will receive $1 million in additional state aid. In fact, that's in the law. And it's probably because if it's in the law, it's probably safer than the amount of money we get anyway, because this is the per capita funding for towns and villages in the state is not in the law. It is historically what they've done and what they've continued to do. And if you look at 15, 20 years ago, they gave a lot more money, but they cut it down, cut it down, and cut it out. There's no specific quantity identified that says towns get so much and villages get so much. However, this should really be increased by $1 million to reflect, because it's passed in the law that if consolidated, this was passed in the end of the session last summer, a $1 million additional extra. So we tried to add it at the end, but it's not appropriate where it should be. It should be right here. So we're going to add $1 million on there. Yes?
So that amount is one time or annual?
It's in the law to be given every year.
And is that verifiable? Or
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They currently getting anything right now?
What?
Village and town. Is this just a complete 1 million plus windfall? Excuse my ignorance, I don't come with these.
In the Citizen Empowerment Act, if a village dissolved and merged with a town of our size and our tax levy, 1 million would be available.
Every year.
Every year, and that is in the Empowerment Act that was enacted by Governor Cuomo when he was. Because of the type of government the Efficiency Committee recommended to the joint village and town, which is a village town-wide, okay, in other words, expand the village to the town boundaries with a village form of government. Some people call it coterminous because once a year you have to do some town legally required business. We were successful in amending the finance law to include the type of government that we're proposing. And so the $1 million is now available to us.
And this is so we have not been subsidized previously from the state for the village. And
We haven't
this is a
merged.
plus
Never.
strict $1 million.
If
And what
we
would you do
merge.
with the money, just out of curiosity, if any thoughts there?
Pardon?
With that kind of money, what would you propose to do within our budget?
Well, 70% must be used for the purposes of tax reduction. That's a requirement of the law. 70% must be used to reduce taxes. 30% can be used, whatever the new government would determine, whether it be codification of, you know, if you needed to bring in attorneys to bring your two planning boards together. Although the planning committee found in their report to the joint boards that really there is very little difference, right? Very little difference in so it will not be hard to merge the planning boards and the zoning board of appeals.
Now,
So
one of the
30% is for the government to
So
do.
I want to identify, okay, if the total amount of,
This would be there for 2014, I don't mean it.
Pardon me?
This would be for 2014?
well,
We have
it's,
to supply
no,
for
I can't,
2013.
we can't say it was 2014. You realize that, you know, the town and the village boards have not decided to go forward with
Oh, no, I
the election, okay? At this particular point, I don't think it's gonna be, even if they voted this summer, I think it would probably be 2015, but I really don't know. It might be 2014, but they'd have to move pretty fast, okay?
It's just one thing that I just find interesting about this is, from the outside, I see so much disagreement over these numbers. But even, you know, maybe I just make a straight point here, just some common sense, but even if your numbers were 20% off,
Yeah.
you subsidize $1 million and argue about going forward when it can add that much to our coffers right away.
Yeah, well, now, let me explain what it is, and I'll get to you, honest. Okay, $1 million if you loaded up the tax revenues, the tax things, okay, when I totaled it up, and you'll see it, if you go back and look, I think the total amount of money to be raised was about $10,350,000. So you're looking at about a 9% reduction. The $1 million results in about a 9% reduction in your taxes, and therefore, you know, if you were looking at, so if you're looking at taxes, and I started to do my taxes today, and it's I think the town taxes, well, of course, that included the county, but it's significant. I mean, it's significant. It's $200, $300 easily. For my house, yeah.
It's so hard to feel comfortable relying on that. I mean, you know, the state says they're gonna give the school district money and then they don't. And it's like everyone's broke. This state is incredible. I don't really understand how they can guarantee that they're gonna have that $1 million
But
every year.
this is a little bit different, Andrea. This is a little bit different. Yes, they could go ahead and change the law. The stuff you're talking about, school aid, you talk about this aid, okay, it's something that, and the aid to the counties and so forth, it is not, it's in the state law, you know, that they're gonna support the counties in this situation, but there's nothing in that's firm dollars. This is firm dollars in a law. Yes, they could change it. Sure, they could change it, okay? But I don't anticipate them changing this, they would any other law, okay?
They have 35 million
My understanding,
budget.
though, is that the act, Citizens Empowerment Act, has to be funded every year by a budget. And if it's not funded, doesn't matter what the law says, the budget, so Governor Cuomo has funded it for the last 2 years, and the legislature all agreed. But being that Governor Cuomo was the champion of this whole idea from when he was district attorney, attorney general,
Yeah.
then for me, it's a question of how long does this whole program last as far as it being budgeted, because there's plenty of examples of where initiatives have been entered into by,
Oh, absolutely.
by politicians that want to make a name for themselves and go on a certain platform. Then you get to the next, term, the next governor, then they have their own ideas. So that there's really no guarantee that this will be budgeted. And that's my understanding, and that's my reading from reading other people, comments of other people on the web who have, in other communities, who have been skeptical.
This is a fairly new, okay, it's the first time that it's being utilized. Is a possibility, okay, I can't deny that, they can change the laws, okay, but the point is this, that today it's available, and we should certainly consider it today, okay, as part of the decision. If the decision was just this, and this was the only savings, okay, there might be a reason, but there's savings significantly beyond this, okay, and then we'll get that when we go through the rest of the stuff. Yes.
Sorry, I think that's a great point, how long it can last, obviously. But I think it provides an excellent umbrella to let us try this. Because if we did merge the governments and it doesn't work, but we're subsidized that first year, and we can separate that money from what we were subsidized, and it doesn't work, we can always decide to go back to 2 governments. Is it that hard to do? So we're getting a free ride here.
Never thought about that one.
Oh my God.
It's a free ride. We can always go back.
Well, it might be a job, but the answer is yes. The chances are, I tell you, there probably is, the chances you can go back, okay, it would probably cause almost as much trouble as to try to get this in place, so, but it's possible.
But Dave, he is right on the one side, because if the village and the history of one government in this community has always been dissolve the village. So let us not get confused, and that still goes on, because a town form of government is the lowest recognized form of government in New York State. So villages, by the conceptual view of Albany, don't exist except by incorporation, as the village of New Paltz is. So if we dissolved, okay, and consolidated that way, we could not go back. By looking to bring the two governments together in a coterminous form of government with a village form of government as opposed to a town form of government, potentially you could go back.
Don't sell everything.
Dave, can I say something, please?
Yes?
Even to me, if the $1 million isn't in perpetuity, if we get it for 2, 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, you get 9% of your taxes decreased for those 2, 3 years. So what happens if the government decides to, well, let's change it from $1 million to 500,000? Well, so then you're only gonna get 4.5%. But at the point is, you may have 2 or 3 years of that 9% going into your pocket. The worst case scenario, I mean, there are other savings, and that's what has to be looked at. This is what I call your whipped cream on top of your ice cream. You know, your ice cream is your basic, and if you want to make it nice, you add some whipped cream and chocolate sauce. But even if you only get it for 3 years, better in your pocket than in the government's pocket. I mean, that's the way we were looking at it. This wasn't saying, well, this will be in perpetuity. Nobody knows this. But it's nice to have it in your pocket for a little bit of
But the
time.
point that I want to make, okay, and I think this one to make, it's as guaranteed, or maybe more guaranteed, than this line right here. Than this $115,000. It's as guaranteed as that. It's probably more guaranteed than this,
Yeah, that's
because
what
this is the $1 million in law. This is not even, you know,
If
this
the
is
other
just.
figures are satisfactory, people like the idea or whatever, this $1 million, the fact that it may not be in perpetuity, no big deal. It's that much better for you.
All right. Are there any other further questions or any things that we can answer in relationship to revenues, or anybody other suggestions that people may have?
You don't have copies of that available, do you?
Pardon me?
Do you have copies, extra copies available of your chart?
The clerk can get one for you. If you give me your email, I'll have her email after the meeting.
Thank you.
I'll have her send it to you.
All right.
The thing that, Dave, we did not deal with at all was the town can collect sales, they get a portion of sales tax, which villages don't get. And we left that neutral altogether because if you're not aware of it, this whole safety net thing that the county has implemented and affects what proportion you're now going to get in sales tax. And nobody really knows what the town collects sales tax revenue on both village businesses and town outside village businesses.
Well, the town doesn't, no, the state does.
Yeah, well, the state. And we get a certain proportion, but they're trying to tie that proportion into the social services aspect in the safety net. So nobody really knows how much money the pot's going to be. So we didn't even include that.
And that's really outside this discussion. It's gonna happen or it's not gonna happen.
Does that make
Right.
a difference in terms of whether it's at the town as it is now versus the town merged with the village? Is there any difference in terms of how that sales tax
Well,
would?
In the old days, I'm gonna say in the old days, if we merge, then we get that portion, a larger portion actually, because it's gonna be a village town-wide. But what that figure is, I have no idea. And no one has an idea in terms, so I wouldn't even.
Right, but if we were still in the old days, the town gets that portion now. The town would still get the portion, town village would get the same portion.
Because it's
It
getting,
was still
we
aside
didn't
from
even,
any-
we didn't even wanna go there, Mike, because it is so convoluted now nobody really knows what the portion is or will be. And so rather than mislead people, we didn't do it.
It's not here.
It's not here, yes.
If the $1 million is off the table.
It
what
isn't.
Just say it's off the table and that is not a consideration. What financially why should we go and consider merging or coterminous?
Well,
or
our
whatever?
report.
What are the financial
Yeah.
savings without the $1 million on the table? Because it seems like that's what you're pushing, and that is a concern for me as a resident of the village. Is that's being pushed to us? This is the lifesaver, and it may not.
No.
It may save
No,
our
no,
taxes.
no, let me answer that question, okay? All right. When we figured this out, okay, without the $1 million, okay, the village was looking at $3.50 a thousand reduction of tax. In other words, if you had a $200,000 appraised house in the village, okay, you'd be looking at $700 reduction, okay? $700 reduction in your joint town village taxes, okay? In the town, you would would be about 80 cents a thousand. If I read this, town reduction would be about 10%.
Dave, what do the reductions look like next year without a merger?
But
What do the reductions look like in taxes for the village and the town if we just stay the way we are? Does anybody know?
Reductions?
reduction.
What are we looking at?
Well, now,
next
one of the
year?
problems you've
Without-
got, all right, is that, you know, we looked at 2011, all right? And if we look at what even in 2 years, from 2011 to 2013, if you look at what the communities have to pay for retirement, it's gone up almost 30%, okay? So that's a significant amount of money. And medical is going up almost 20%, all right? And those are rough figures, okay? They aren't exact figures, but that's, and in fact, this last year, I think it was 18 and 15%. But so that anything the town and the village operating as one can do to maintain the same services and put some efficiencies on, and yes, over periods of time, there will be, hopefully, expected a lower workforce than the combined between the town and the village today. In regards to that, I went back and looked, because I was supervisor 16 years ago. And when I left the town in 1996, and I look at go down to town hall, and I see who's in town hall that was there when I left. 2 people. And by the way, some of those positions have turned over 2 or 3 times. So there's about a 5 or 8% turnover of people every year over a period of years. And, that's, it's not static.
But we didn't answer his question.
Sorry, I didn't, I tried to.
There,
What are we looking at next year without a merger?
If
What are
we-
looking at
one has to assume.
What's that?
One has to assume you're not looking at a reduction, okay? And don't forget, in all of this conversation, we have to remember there's a 2% cap, which was not true in 2011. And Gail, I wanted to just point out something. Pushing is not a term that I would use. All we were asked to do was to look at the two budgets and see if there was enough there of overlap and duplication, which would suggest that we should continue to pursue the whole question of consolidation. This is not a budget for a consolidated government.
I was wondering what the town.
Okay,
would
we
say
just
as far as what
are
taxes.
looking, is it worth going forward to see whether we should do this? And that's just financially, I mean, we could, this is the finance committee, but we could talk about all the reasons other than that we should be doing this. But, so I do wanna just caution that was the referendum item itself requires, okay, that we have I would presume, because I'm not doing this again, an outside auditor or the town, village auditors together must come up with a financial statement of cost savings for 3 years prior to the referendum vote. So if the referendum vote were in 2014, say, then you would be looking at those figures for 3 years, and it must state what the costs are and what the savings will be. That's part of the law. It requires you to do for the referendum.
But there is gonna be,
Motivated, because they're not
but-
saving as much money.
what?
They're saving 80 cents. I'm just wondering how they feel about the numbers, because there's not as much leeway. If we're gonna save in the village $3.50, and they're gonna save 80 cents. And I'm just wondering if, based on whatever budget they're looking at next year, would they save more if we didn't merge? Because I'm not thinking about the extra subsidy.
Yeah, well, the $1 million, of course, would provide
But they
a
have to be as
greater,
motivated as the village.
Right.
That's without the $1 million.
Yeah.
Of course, you add the $1 million
Yeah.
to that, it's another 10% added to that, okay?
If I may say,
We're jumping ahead because we haven't covered expenditures yet, and that's several weeks going.
Yeah, that's, we have to go through the question of expenditures, and those are questions.
but Mike,
The
you've
town
had
will
the
make its own
advantage of
budget
being at
like
some
it is.
meetings,
Right.
and some people, this is their first meeting, so.
and as Dave said, in certain areas that I'm aware of, what was $600,000 in 2011, the cost for 2012 went up to $1 million. Now, to me, I don't care if it's 80 cents or if it's, $180 or whatever. I'd rather have that right temporarily in my pocket. We can, like you said, we can always look forward. But right now, based upon these figures, which were 2011, there would have been an 80 cents. What's gonna be 2013, what's gonna be, and when we get to the expenses, I'm sure there are a lot of people that have other input, which we would have appreciated at the time we were doing this, which is why we were always trying to be open, because none of us are geniuses. I don't claim to be a genius. I know finances, I look at things, I know what makes sense, and I know what doesn't make sense. But again, when it comes to whether I want that money in my pocket or I want that in Albany's pocket, I want it in my pocket, and I don't care what it is.
Okay, are there further, yes, question? It's on the revenues,
Pardon me?
on revenues, yes, revenues. We're talking about revenues.
Oh, yeah. I'm a bit of a simpleton when it comes to budgets, but it seems like with a couple of the lines that you've mentioned, you've played with those numbers based on other criteria that didn't really exist in 2011. So if you were gonna take if I was gonna take my budget for 2011 and list out things, I would not include the $1 million because it didn't exist in 2011. I would include the sales income because that did exist in 2011. And that would give me a basis for comparing apples and apples. But if you've taken those lines and applied conditions that exist now in 2013 in order to say, in order to play with it, it skews it. So I wonder what other lines are there that you've taken and applied criteria that exist now in order to, try and be fair. I know that's your intent is to
Right,
try and
the $1 million did exist in 2011.
It did. So
It
it's
didn't
good- so
exist
then-
for us
Okay.
because
So
we
then it's-
weren't anticipating it, but by law, it existed.
So then it's appropriate to include in the budget somewhere, but the sales revenue would also be a appropriate to
We can include it.
You know, because that in 2011, if we were merged, we would have the sales tax revenue from a larger population base that we don't have now.
But the other,
Alright,
the
so-
problem with that, Ray, that I see is if, say, in 2013, the town does not get it. I mean, we're separate, so the village has never gotten sales tax revenue. The town doesn't get it. Then we're going to be accused of overinflating the revenue. And our whole intent, I believe, I'm correct in saying, was to try to be, I don't like the term conservative, but, but to try to be, if in doubt, not mislead.
Right. But if you, I think you should include that explanation somewhere, because I think it's a fair analysis to add on comments on the end.
We could show it down at the bottom.
But to me,
Yeah.
in 2011, if we were merged, we would get a tax income from a larger base. Now put an
Now,
asterisk on there.
the point that Sally, I'm pretty sure this is correct, okay? If the town does get a small amount of sales tax from the county, it did get a small amount of sales tax in the county in 2011, okay? That sales tax took care of the whole community. It covered the portion of the village as well as the town, okay? So the point is just that it really wouldn't be any more.
It wouldn't.
No, I don't
No.
think it's more, it wouldn't be any more.
No,
Well, there wouldn't be an increase. Then I misunderstood what you
No.
were saying about why
No,
you
no,
left
no,
it
she
out.
said, I'll go back and try to
No,
triple
it's okay.
check. Said that the present time, the county executive, okay, is looking at whether he wants to change how sales tax is used and how it comes to the village and how it comes, how it comes to the individual communities.
Right. I understand that going forward, but in 2011, that wasn't the case.
No, so it's,
So let me ask you, I hate let me, if sales revenue gets figured the same way, would there be an increase in 2013 if we were
No.
There wouldn't.
no, and
Then I misunderstood
and
the
Ray,
point.
there might be a decrease in 2013 because.
but not because of merger.
No, not because of merger, but because this whole new formula, which nobody's really on top of yet, the combining safety net and,
Yeah.
what is the term? I don't wanna call it home, I don't wanna call it welfare, but it's, that towns get a certain amount of money to help with home relief. Okay, it's all being figured in there, and they're saying that because so much of the state has dumped onto counties much more of the welfare bill, and therefore the counties are saying, we have to keep the sales tax revenue to compensate for those. I think I'm explaining this
That's
correctly.
what's gonna happen in 2013.
That's what they're
So
saying.
that's gonna happen,
So because of
that's
that,
independent of what we
you
do.
didn't- So because of that, you didn't increase that figure, not because if it changes, there's a larger population base through which
Right,
taxes.
I'm
will
sorry,
be paid.
I
No, I
misspoke.
probably just didn't understand.
There is an effect, though, it seems to me that, I mean, aside from whatever is going on, going forward in terms of how sales.
You
tax
could
is
still show it.
remitted, it seems like the sales tax revenues that go to the town in 2011 go to the town budget, thereby the town residents. Now, in a consolidated situation, those revenues would be shared between town and village.
No. No, town budget, okay, is made up of the A fund, which is townwide expenses, such things as police and so forth.
Okay.
Includes expenses within the village that the town is responsible for. That's where that income goes into. And so that it would still go into, it was into a community-wide fund, and it continues to stay in a community-wide fund.
Okay, that's town services inclusive of the village.
That's where that income is used, and it would continue to be used in a merged community. Or
If
in
we
a-
get any at all.
Okay, all right. Now, were there any questions, other questions that people had in regards to revenue? Well, okay, we'll leave this, okay, if there are, if you think of some between now and next week, okay? I don't wanna go back and go through it, but we will certainly, cover, answer it independently, if you have those questions, all right? Now, we're going to select, what we're doing today is we're taking and looking at the expenditure changes down to include supervisor contractual. In other words, we're looking at the legislative changes, and we're looking at combining the supervisor's office, the mayor offices, and the legislative contractual for both. Now, one of the things, and once again, we're looking at 2011 and what it be. Now, if you were to go and look at the budgets today for the town and for the village, you would find these figures significantly higher. There have been, the mayor gets a significant, the mayor's salary has gone from, where is it here? Mayor's gone from 22,000, okay, to 35. The supervisor's salary has gone from mid-40s to, I don't know, 60 something, I think. And it's also the town and village trustees and town board members have also had their salaries increase. All those increases impact what the figures would be if you're making a new budget for 2015, and they would also increase the savings because of because if you reduce them, then you're pulling those a greater amount out of the taxes. Now, what I did this afternoon is I tried to combine all of these figures and put them together down here and impact, and I think they come up to exclusive, forget about the court contractual, parking personnel, and these court services and so forth, which had no change. I took the other ones, and I think I came up with $268,100 as the cost in 2011, and we projected that the cost would be $139. Now, when we're looking at reduction, and I'm not sure at this point whether the new government is looking at 5 members of a village board or whether they're looking at 7, okay? But I think when we did this, we were looking at 5. I think we were looking at 5 at that point. Okay. So when you talk about the reduction to 139, okay, you're talking about almost all, or probably 80% of it at least, in salary costs. And I think that we want to keep in track, because people have asked, how come you've got social service, Social Security payments reductions and medical reductions, and you've got retirement benefit reductions when you did that particular area. Well, so if you pull out 3 people or 4 people out of Social Security, you pull out 1 person who gets medical, and I think you have to pay retirement on everybody.
Both the supervisor and mayor.
But you have to retire on everybody gets to be paid retirement. No?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, all right, well, okay, retirement, so there's one
But
retirement
both
and
the
there's one.
supervisor and the mayor have full
One, and the
benefits.
secretary for the supervisor, which is it here, okay, which we would keep. So the plan was, one secretary, one mayor supervisor, and we projected those costs at $139,000.
Which lines are you talking about, Jake?
Pardon me?
Which lines are you talking about there?
Legislative,
We're
Mike.
talking about 1010, this one here, this one, and this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one.
Down to 1201, is that right? Down through 1220 then, down through the supervisor contractual?
Yes, we get down to the auditor.
Okay.
And that's, but once again, I'll be frank with you, this was 2011, okay? My guess is that if you made a 2015 budget, you're going to have to see, those salaries are gonna be higher, but, yes.
Here's one question. Did you give thought to the fact that in a merged municipality, the board of trustees, 4 trustees, that's a lot more work.
Well, I have a question about that, okay?
I do too.
No, I have a question about that, okay? If you've watched the board of the village and the board of the town the last 6 months and saw how many meetings they've had, okay, where they've discussed consolidation, or they've discussed the fire department budget, or they've discussed Moriella Pool, etc., okay? I think it might be less work. Less time they'd have to spend.
Well, let's think about 2011 here.
2011, the same thing happened. The same thing was happened in 1991, 92, 93, 94, and 95, because I was supervisor. And we had a tremendous amount of time. You don't really appreciate that, okay, unless you've sat up here on one of these boards, and I see Stuart over here smiling, and Sally over here smiling. You don't really appreciate how much energy and negotiation and attorney fees and stuff go back and forth between the town and the village, and it's been that way for 100 years. And it was that way, as I said, 20 years ago when I was supervisor. Maybe not as bad as it is today, but it was bad at times. We'd had disagreements. Okay? It's the truth, okay? Yes?
So your argument here for that the same amount of trustees could handle the additional issues that come up because you're taking away all the
Yes, I'm saying that, yeah.
intra-government,
Yeah, I think so.
town.
I think so, yeah. They don't, that's upon your opinion, but that's the thing. One of the things that, there's just, I think that it would allow one board to work on the community issues and take the personality issues out and the things. Because I'll tell you a story. And when I was supervisor, and we're having a town and village board meeting coming up. And at the last minute, I got run in with a proposal, with a legal document. The village had just completed a new water treatment plant up there on the mountain for $3.5 million. And the village wanted us to remove that water treatment tract from the tax roll, so they wouldn't have town taxes on it, and they wouldn't have village school taxes on it. They wanted to remove that $3.5 million assessed value on that property up there, so they wouldn't have to pay taxes on it and charge it when their water rates were mostly for the town and, for the village residents and those in the town who receive water. Very difficult position. Not for the people on the village board, because yes, they want that done. But for the supervisor and the members of the town board, a difficult decision, because they're represented not only, and they're elected not only by the people in the village, but they're also elected on the people outside the village. So if we approve this, there would be a slight tax increase for those people outside the village. Very difficult decision. Well, I finally came down and I said, yeah, it's best to grant it, okay, and the board, and the town board, except for one person, said yes, we'll approve removing the tax roll. And I'll tell you something, 20 years later, okay, I'm not sure I made the right decision. I am not sure I made the right decision. But that's the type of problem that you want to have the person look at the whole community and not just one section. And that's why I think one of the reasons I think that it's desirable to have a unified government for the community.
Another example would be the police might. The police, years ago, and Dave was in on this, years
Before my
ago,
time.
with the village police department, the village then gave it up, and it became a town police department. One can always look at things from hindsight better than out. But the village has no say at all with
Well,
regard
yes, they have
to-
say, but they don't go to, I mean, everything can go ahead and argue with the town.
Well, you can go and argue, but the bottom line is that all police coverage is town government through the A fund. Okay, there is a police commission, there is a village rep on the police commission. But for the most part, the area that probably has the greatest coverage is supposedly in the village, but the village government really has no say on police needs or police coverage. In one government, you would not have that kind of bickering, arguing. The one government would be the body to which the police responded to.
Yeah, but I would suggest that there are other problems that you are exchanging, and we can argue theoretically if one.
Would you
if the
please tell me
exchange is
what they
done.
are?
The idea of special benefit districts and.
Special
you
benefit
have-
districts?
you have-
Oh, okay.
You have different interests within a municipality. And, people that are outside the village may outnumber those, the village or what's the downtown and populated dense areas.
Well,
In the
yeah.
in the circumstance we have now, the people within the village, boundaries, they have a certain amount of representation. They share representation among a small body. Once the whole municipality is merged, they have a proportionally less of a share. So how do you get these disparate points of view? Someone that lives out, for instance, in the outer reaches of the town, they see the village.
But that is
very
handled,
different
I
way.
think,
And
that's
then
handled,
really
I
get
hope.
into this question of, do we have a sidewalk tax?
You know what, may I answer the question quick, because I know what you're talking about, and I understand your concern, okay? You handle it two ways. You handle it first, okay, because the, you elect some of those representatives on the town board by district, by an area, whether it be a village area, town area, or so forth. So there's a person on the board, okay? There's a mayor, supervisor, that's total-wise and property and at large, but there is a person, okay, that is interested in your situation and your problem, and that's who you call, okay? And you have control over the election of that person. Now,
He makes a very fair point though, and it is interesting, and I was thinking congressional, almost the way you want to solve the problem, but you almost have the same type of intra-argument you would, because people are gonna be, now you're gonna be representing a constituency just like you are now. What I think would be interesting to propose or to say is, can we look at some of these issues that, you know, what, basic democracy, protect the minority? I don't know how much of a minority the village is going to be, but can we, this is not a reactive type of thing, so can we be proactive and find out just what are the special needs that might be within the village right now?
well, I want to finish answering your question before we get to that, okay? Because it's like, there are only identified in our report, in our final report, 2 special districts. 3, I take it, 3 special districts. 1, community-wide water. 1 is community-wide sewer. And there was a 3rd proposal, okay, that the boards can adopt or decide not to adopt, okay? And that was that since there was such a large, and 25 to 30% of the police or more of the police activity was centered in the community, right in the center, okay? We felt that, I felt, okay, and I convinced the rest of the thing, that they should pay a little bit extra, not a lot, but they should just pay a little bit extra because they were getting such a big tax reduction on the total amount of taxes, so that their tax reduction would be in the area of slightly less than $1 per thousand, still a reduction, but it would make a little bit of a difference to those people that live outside of the metropolitan area of this community, who aren't getting as much of a reduction as those in the village. But that's a decision the board's made at the side. We're not gonna do that, it's too much of a problem, we're only talking about a small amount of money, they might forget about it.
May I interject here? I can tell you're both town residents. There's no such thing as a special district in the form of government that we're proposing. They are benefit assessment districts.
Excuse me, all right.
Town law requires special districts. That is not true in a village form of government. They are benefit assessment districts.
Council, we agree that that's a term, so you want to correct our use of the
No,
term.
because they really are quite different, okay? A benefit assessment district is based on, let me go your way, special district. If you wanted to have water, okay, you would have to create, legally pay for, legally bond a certain section in the town to create that special district, if you will. A benefit assessment district is far different because right now the town has water special districts, okay, and they have special sewer districts. If we manage to have consolidation in a village town-wide form of government, all water and sewer would become one, okay? And it would be a benefit assessment district in the sense that if you did not have water and sewer, you would not pay for it, okay? There's no legal overstructure that you have to build, all right?
Okay, yes.
Okay, so that's a difference in terminology, and I wanted to correct that because I've noticed that people who live in the town talk about how many special districts are you going to form, okay? And that's a very logical question, except that you need to go the other way.
But, and the point is this, that would be one benefit district, okay? The president of the town, I think, has 3 or 4 sewer 2 or 3 sewer districts, yeah, 3 or 4 water districts.
I think
It
it's
all, what?
5 water districts.
5 districts, so they just get down to they would just be part of the benefit district as part of the village. So actually, it does, and that saves money for the community, okay? Because when you do an audit, and when the town files their documentation, the end of year documentation, they have to record dollars and expenses and audit all of those special districts, just and that's a so that if in fact you get rid of those things and they're just headed as benefit districts, and 1 benefit district or 2 benefit districts instead of 6 or 7 districts in the town there are today, okay, you will reduce audit costs.
No, I want to go back to the first part of your question that you raised, which hasn't been resolved yet. And it really is, you know, it's going to be a debate, and I'm not sure I know the answer, because I can see both sides of the argument. You can have 7, if we go with 7, okay, elected at large. But then that doesn't address the question that you raised, and that is, who will represent me? So there is also under consideration the thought about wards. And wards mean that, and one of the areas that really, I think, has not been addressed, and is that, I don't know how long you've been in New Paltz, but about 5 years ago, the people who lived in South Ohioville and South Ohio and North Ohioville Road and that whole Plutarch Road, they wanted to secede from the town of New Paltz and go with Lloyd because they felt like the very, very poor stepchild, nobody ever even concerned themselves with their problems. So from that standpoint, if you look at it from that angle, we should be looking at wards and saying, okay, you know, this is an area of the community that needs its own representative to speak for them. And so that's when you would sort of try and devise a ward system that's based on geographic areas that need different consideration than others. The problem with that is we only have a population of 14,000 people all total. And do you really want to have a ward system? You could combine it, you could have, like Kingston has, an alderman at large and the rest are wards. And the boards have not fought that one out yet as to which it's going to be. And I think it really is a very good question, Mike, because I think I can see both pros and cons, both sides of the aisle. You know, if we want to be one community, should we divide ourselves up?
Well, my point was, the reason why I brought that up, to just to tack back, was because we were discussing the Dave's comment that there'll be a great improvement in efficiency on the 2 boards because they won't have to deal with
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, your point is well taken.
Between the 2, and my point is that yes, but factionalism is a thing that happens, and you can't get around factionalism. And if you're in one, the reason why you have a village for probably as long as it's been there is partially because of the comfort zone of the residents in the village in terms of having control over.
Yeah, but the point is this: can the village residents still pay? You know, be willing to pay? And they're paying a very high premium for that. Very high premium for that. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, does the town have an agenda I just wanna bring up an example as of police. I've heard many people in the town be upset because they feel that they're footing a large police bill and not getting, and most of the trouble is in the village, or most of the police presence is required in the village. Does the town have an agenda, do you think, that if they would unite the boards, that, now you could have Aldermen, you can have wards, but if you have 6 wards and there's only 1 for the village, you'll be outvoted 5-1 every time. So I just wanna know, what would you propose, because, I mean, I've spoken to Kevin Barry at length about it, and he makes a fair point. I'm not trying, I live in the village, so I'm not saying I shouldn't, contribute my fair share for whatever my protection costs. But he feels that the town is, the town board and the town people are supporting too much of a percentage of the cost of police protection. And he feels that the village is not paying them. Now, if we were to consolidate, what would that do? What type of impact would that have on the residents of the village?
Well, today, and it's a planned, okay? No change. No change, okay?
Could they vote immediately?
Now,
Can I
yeah,
just
they
say
could
one
move,
thing about that?
board could move ahead, okay, and that's one of the reasons, and I know that I'm probably a minority, and I know Ira thinks that, but the example that I gave, I would like to see that if you go to a ward district, that everybody had a slice of every one of the wards, okay, had a slice of what today is the village, and some business and some rural, so that they had to look at the whole picture, even though they were
It's
representing the
very
ward.
complicated.
But that's not, but it doesn't, but
Yes,
The reason that the Finance Committee discussed the BID of the Article 19 was specifically for what you're saying.
what's BID?
Business Improvement District, or an Article 19. Article 19 is can be a little bit more targeted. I got it the last time somebody else did.
okay, all right, fine.
You're
Article
done with that
19
one
can be a little bit
anyway.
more specific than a BID, because if you do a BID, you gotta do the whole business improvement district. If you go with an Article 19, you can say, well, just say those businesses that are open until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because that's where the police should be there. So this is why we added that thought to it, because the whole concept is what you're saying, is that the town, for example, could probably live like the other towns do, with the normal police patrol from the county, from the state, or whatever, because that's what they're basically, that type of coverage is what they're getting now. So this is why we were looking at the consideration, or throwing out the idea of consideration of a BID or an Article 19. Because basically, again, the difference in an Article 19, if you get the guy who closes at 4 o'clock in the afternoon because he does package deliveries, you don't want to have him raise his taxes by 20% because it's not fair. But that's why we were looking at these kind of situations. Because the village, when you talk about the village using the bulk of the police, we're talking about the business. We're not
Main
talking.
Street.
Yeah, we're talking
One
about Main
property
Street.
deep.
We're talking
Up and
about,
down.
to qualify it from my perspective, District 6 of the village. And there's another
Well,
district,
it's,
yeah.
no, it's
Zone
zone 6,
Zone six.
police zones. We
Police
don't wanna
zone, yeah.
confuse them.
Police Zone 6, okay, which is basically the heart of the downtown business area, and I think part of a little piece of 4, which is off the thruway. These could be done, and that money, and that will save the town residents a lot of money. You
Well,
put
not
this-
much, it's just a little bit. Well, it depends on how much you charge.
Well, it depends upon how much you charge, but like I said, we can go through the statistics which I brought to the
Yeah,
finance
sure,
committee
yeah.
of which businesses are using tremendous amounts of police presence and what that cost is and what they pay in taxes now.
Yeah, but I wanna say that, okay, if you look at that, okay, there are areas of the village that very, very seldom get a police call.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
you know,
I'm not, all I'm.
yeah, it's so that,
relaying
it's
is what
not
I think
only,
is-
it's
That-
not
that's
only.
why
On board feel they're paying 3 to 1. That's a pretty substantial number, and I would like to know if there was an agenda there where they're gonna say, okay, we're on board now it's time to really, let's get some equity here, of course, how.
That's what the bid in the Article 19 we're trying to do. Whether it's successful or not, I can't tell you, because that's up to the people when they decide what they want to do. The same thing with wards. I'm not a big believer personally in at-large, because at-large represents nobody but the politician. when you have wards or districts or whatever, no, it's the truth. I mean,
I don't know,
well, I've talked to people, you know, on the town board or whatever, and, you know, they have their little groups that they support and whatever. I'm not saying you're selling, you know, but at large basically is, I'm worried about myself and my little special interest group. When you have wards or districts, let's say you have 7. All right, it's gonna be a little bit of a hassle, but I look at it this way. First of all, I got somebody that I can complain to. You wanna be a politician, you wanna have the power, well then you damn well better, represent me. Because I don't care if you don't represent District 9. You're looking out for me, you're the person I'm gonna complain to, you're the person I'm gonna elect. It's a much more effective, I mean, you look at any form of government above us, they all do it that way. Because you should have somebody, like you said, I should have somebody I can complain to. You know, if I complain to somebody in the town board and they say, oh, you live over here, I don't, you know.
No, I just don't wanna see factions develop if you can help it, as you know, in some of the.
Well, okay, but
That's what I was thinking about
it
this
really-
Rose.
If you have 7 members from wards, let's say you have 7 different members of wards, you're gonna have the factions possibly, but you'll have the factions all there hammering it out. You're not gonna have one faction sitting over here, one faction sitting over there, not talking to each
Instead of
other.
have one argument under one roof. one
Exactly,
side.
and
Yeah,
you result,
okay,
and if you can
yeah,
get all
I
7,
agree on that.
you can get all 7 ward
okay?
dealers.
This is a discussion, this is the thing there, but that's not the physical issue that we're talking here tonight,
No,
okay?
I just wanted to
And that's
answer the
thing,
question.
okay? We
But-
covered the initial area, next week we will cover, yes, we will cover more. Are there any more of the discussion, Paul?
I did want to point one thing out. The business incentive district that we proposed cannot be implemented without a merged government. Okay? It can't be.
Yes, Paul?
Just because of the comfort level of the village that you were speaking at and those bad townies. Okay?
Paul, yes.
The opposite as well, right?
Thank you for holding this, and I know it's an incredible amount of work, 5 meetings, so I appreciate it. And I do want to follow up on the methodology and the finances. One of the things I heard, and my concerns are that we understand the methodology used to arrive at the figures. And what I heard was that we would have fewer districts, whatever they are, whether they're special interest or business improved. I heard 3 terms now: special districts, beneficial districts, and then EIDs and Article 19s, but they all to me mean that certain people, for instance, who have sewers, if they are in that district, they pay for the sewers.
Yes.
The idea you raised, Dave, which was new to the community, or at least new as something that appears on paper,
Yes.
makes a lot of sense to me, which is a business improvement district, like the Times Square Improvement District in Manhattan, where the people in Times Square who are open 24 hours and have those, they in fact pay for, or they reimburse the police department for those officers that are necessary at a certain time, and for the street cleaning or whatever. I don't know if that'll ever come through. But what I did hear from a methodology standpoint was that the committee, the finance committee, believed that there would be fewer districts than exist now, or there would be, and fewer audits. I think that was the point. So my question is, how much savings did the committee project that are in the numbers now from the reduced auditing costs?
When we get to the audit, when we got the audit category, which will be next week, I think.
Next week.
We will cover that, Paul.
But you did.
We will cover that.
I'm just trying, fair enough. So what you're saying is that was an example of the kind of assumption you made. There would be-
That's right, okay,
So there's a saving.
when we said, you know, today, no, I'm not gonna go there tonight, Paul.
No,
In
no,
fact,
I'm
you know,
not asking
I'm not
you
gonna
to.
go there and explain it, you know, we'll cover that when we get to audits, and I
That's
think,
fine, Dave.
let's see, I think, I had,
That's about
Audit
a third.
gets-
I think it's,
audit gets next week.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll be here. The,
Thank
it's not the number, it's the methodology, because it helps it all, it informs us that you looked at the 2 situations, pre-consolidation, post-consolidation, made an assumption, and I'm trying to understand those assumptions, and therefore a projection. Now, I do think, I'm glad you called our discussion back to the purpose, because I did hear us getting into, and the discussion getting into governmental issues.
Yes,
But it does appear to me that we got there because the committee itself, beyond the mission or the task assigned it, got into governmental or operational or facts that have nothing to do with the pre-consolidation, post-consolidation savings, but maybe they were necessary, and I want to understand this methodology. Please don't raise your hand while I'm talking.
I'm sorry.
I've listened patiently, and I think that's part of the dysfunctionality of these governments. People never get a chance to finish their thoughts. Interrupting other people is one of the most offensive acts, and it destroys communication. So I'm trying to understand the methodology again. It appears that you had the idea of business improvement districts. You said not everybody agreed, but it's in there. Now, I need to understand as a citizen about the vote on this, how to separate the financial work that the committee did and what we're here to discuss from this list of other operational governmental issues. Why they were, number one, discussed by the Finance Committee and what the justification was. And you said that there was 30% of the police services, 25 or 30 in the town. And the gentleman raised that issue.
You were the very center of the community.
Right. And so I can say, okay, so I want to know the assumptions. Did you say then that we'll make the town pay for it or we won't? I mean, I could see why you would discuss operational issues in order to establish assumptions for your methodology upon which you build your cost.
Well,
but then Sally said, well, Sally gave an example where you said to us, if it's in the village, there wouldn't be. David says there's a disproportionate amount of police service in the town based on the payments. And then, but you gave us an example where you said that the village people might not have a voice because so they could lose coverage, but they don't have a voice. The government that runs the police department is the town government. But it seems to me the town government and the village residents are town residents.
yes, they are.
Has been taking very good care of the village. The town government has not acted in a selfish, self-serving manner, looking at only people outside the village. In fact, there's a disproportionate amount of police service, and I've heard no one. I mean, evidently there has been grumbling, but to this point in time, it has not. I mean, the police chief takes care of that based on needs, I assume. I'm concerned though what I've heard. 6 wards, is the police chief going to have to answer now and parcel out to 6? So again, I need some help in understanding what were the basic ground rules of what the committee discussed and how much of the work of the committee was governmental operations, tax shifting, and how much was projections of savings.
But
98% of it was the question of addressing savings, all right? And I will go back and I will take full responsibility for this, okay? When I finished it and when I worked up, we had the information in regards to through the police chief and for Ira, we had this fact sheet of where police calls were, okay? And it was astounding, okay? It was astounding in regards to, in mine, okay? And by the way, the call, that's just calls. It doesn't say how long the calls took. It doesn't say how many officers had to respond on it or anything else. It just says one call. So, you know, so one call up in Plutarch is one officer, maybe one call in the village is 4 officers. You know what I mean? Okay, it's just one call. So when I got this situation, and I looked at the data, and I came back to committee, and I said, you know, this small section in the community, center of the community, all right, is getting a $4 a thousand savings, all right, per 1,000 of assessed valuation. And that seems a little excessive when they cause significant additional police presence and action, okay? So I said, let's put this in. It's just something that we're asking them to consider. If the board that gets elected and so forth, so we're not gonna do that, that's fine. That's their decision, okay? But it was just something that said, there's $33 million of assessed valuation down there, okay? that $33 million times 4 was getting, what, $140,000 of taxable savings, and yet they're causing most, and not all the places down there, all the places. But the point is that they chose to make a business down there. They've been successful, even though they have to pay the very high tax rates they have today, or so they wouldn't stay there. So, logic was, in my mind, and maybe the boards, when they get together and say, nah, we're not gonna fool around with that and not do it. That was just a suggestion. I will take full responsibility, and if it's turned down, well, that's what you elect people for.
But I wanna go back, because I think Paul is making maybe an assumption that isn't quite, you asked about methodology and assumption. There was an efficiency committee which made recommendations to the joint board. And one of those recommendations is that we consolidate village town-wide with a village form of government. So some of the assumptions and methodologies that the finance committee are based on that assumption, okay? And some of the assumptions are based on other things that the efficiency committee recommended, okay? One of those assumptions is, shall it be 5 or 7? That's for the joint boards to decide. Shall it be at large or wards? That is something for the 2 boards to decide. Is it, the recommendation is nonpartisan elections, which might answer some of the comments, you know, which suggest partisan politics in the sense that we know them Republican, Green, Democratic. But in the village right now, and a recommendation of the committee is that the elections be non-partisan, okay? So there are certain decisions and functions that we made as a finance committee based on those recommendations, and not just, oh gee, what should we do, you know, town or village. We didn't do it that way. We went, the methodology was prescribed, a village town-wide government, but it also was look at the 2011 budget and see if there is enough suggestion there that consolidation, the issue of consolidation should be pursued. I don't know whether, because I don't know whether you came in before or after, but one of the things that the referendum to be presented to the community requires is that there be a section defined of costs and savings, which must be done, I believe, not by a community volunteer board, but we're gonna have to expend some money and have an auditor, or I would prefer an auditor efficiency expert come in and look at both governments and talk about costs and savings, because you have to do it in order to have the referendum anyway. So this was only to suggest whether we should pursue or not pursue.
Sally, you mentioned that, and that's helpful, thank you, that several of the assumptions which were part of the methodology and supported the savings came from the efficiency committee. There were some that came out of the meetings and the communication that you had. Will the distinction between those 2 sources be called out in some final written report so that we can understand which of them, they have different weight. More, though, a concern is we understand from your explanation, and it's helpful, that many of these details, like you said, the BIDs or whatever, the police department, must be decided. Will those details be decided before we go to vote on the consolidation? So if they will be decided, and that's comforting too, all this wards.
Yeah, the joint boards have to decide all
The
this.
joint boards have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, I know the boards recently came up with an understanding at their last meeting. We were Googling firms to perhaps consult with and come through and so forth, that there were a lot of things that weren't understood by some. Ms. Colucci mentioned something she didn't understand this, and that's healthy. That's all healthy. It seems to me that in addition to examining these numbers, which all of us are invested in, getting them right, understanding, there is a lot of detailed work to be done, and that might take several months to answer those questions, or several weeks. And we're projecting to vote when? In November?
We haven't decided that yet. Well,
okay, that seems that.
see, one of the things that I believe in, and I think I sometimes like to know what the goal is and then work back to see how long and what I need to get done before the deadline. Is like writing a paper, for a course. I know when the paper's due, but I don't want to wait till the night before, especially if it's a 100-page paper. So, but that a lot of people don't follow that process. I think that we need an expert to come in and to help and guide us. There are very few experts in New York State, according to NICOM, according to the Secretary of State, because most governments that have tried to consolidate have dissolved their villages. The efficiency committee, and I concur, but I guess people could argue with me, dissolving your urban, if you will, the core, is not in the best interest of the whole community, in my opinion. So that's why we've gone with the idea of a coterminous, better to say village, town. Why? Because I think people understand it more easily. But that makes it more complicated, because in New York State, there are only 5 governments that have done what we're trying to do. And we believe, and I think the efficiency committee, the original efficiency committee, still believes that that is the proper way to go to best reflect the entire community. Okay, so that's...
Want to answer one question, okay, or respond to one question. The question of this benefit improvement district that we suggested is not something that would be proposed as that. It would be something if you decide to have this coterminous village town, okay, that's something that board, once elected and what in place, would take a look at it. Something that would be done after a consolidation.
It's not part of the referendum.
It's not going to be part of the referendum. It just says,
it could be.
Paul, if I may.
My fault for putting it in there.
If it's not part of the referendum, then it can't be part of the savings.
I didn't put it in as part of the savings. It isn't that. Read the report, okay? It says if you did this, this is what the impact would be.
Paul, we looked at the police expenses and stuff, and my report, which is a little bit more specific than the one Dave did all this stuff from, had one. This is why we got involved in bid in Article 19. We saw the amount of cost for the police department and what that represented in tax revenue. On my report, and I won't go through all of them, but there was one business for 1 month had 15 police calls with accumulated use of 60 police officers and 35 cars. Now, that business pays all of $15,000 in county, village, town, and school taxes. This is why we came up with the idea of because, yeah, the village could put in an Article 19 or a bid if it wanted to, so could the town. But if you had a consolidated,
Have a good time,
have a good trip.
Political whatever, it would be a lot more effective against those. And remember, the businesses are a powerful lobby but it would be a lot more effective against those who are gonna say, I don't wanna pay any more taxes. And I've told you, well, we don't have anybody in school. I don't have anybody in school either, but that's what we have to do. That's why it came up. That was the methodology of it. We didn't add it to anything, but we put it in as a suggestion so that people could see another advantage of consolidation, because that's something that could be done under a consolidated a lot easier than under two separate.
So then that's a benefit.
That's a benefit.
However, it's not, I mean, a lot of, we came to the meeting for finance, but this is very, very helpful because, but it's a benefit aside from finance. And Sally pointed out, several people pointed, there are many other benefits. So are we to understand that the business improvement district that would address the issues that David found astounding, that you found incredulous? I'm sure we all know them, but I mean, it frightens me because I've only had a vague idea for 40 years. And I felt that the police are taking care of all of us. There is no way to solve that without consolidation, because as a voter, and voters, I think we need to understand which are those issues that are compelling to us that we can solve without consolidation, and which are those that we must.
Absolutely.
So, is it true that there are no special districts, business districts, Article 19 benefits districts that would address this police dilemma we have?
Not right now. There's no bid or Article 19 that would address this issue. Right.
There's nothing to be done in town.
Nothing. They're the only kind of special districts that we have now are the sewer districts or whatever.
And they are town.
And
they are
town,
not
right. So-
village.
So we need, now these other towns that have joined together, either by dissolving the village, they can or can't do BIDs. I mean,
Sure they can.
Any taxing authority can do a BID or an Article 19. That's the law. That's
well,
the
the town
tax.
is a taxing authority.
But it's
But the
within the
problem is-
village.
It's how you going to tax? You're going to get involved in taxing those businesses in the village, and the village is going to say, "Well, these are my." You know, it's a lot easier to get this through. That was the point. It's a lot easier.
But not impossible.
It's not impossible,
Thank
but
you.
have to have. What you would have to have is 2 full reassessments, the whole total reassessment of the village, and then you'd have to have a reassessment of the town, and then a reassessment of everybody. If the
We
reason
always do that, though, Ira.
No, but-
We always do reassessments of every one of the residents and businesses, so that's not 2 different things. We've been doing that for 50 years, 100 years.
Yeah, except that it has to be done, you have to have a 2-year history of reassessment, according to Article 19. That's so.
It's the same
it's
number
done,
of properties.
okay, if it's done, it's done. I mean, you look at some of the assessments pool, and you know some of these assessments are like weird.
Ira, I was the chairman of the board.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said you know they're weird.
Serve comment at this particular point.
Also-
Hey,
also,
all right, let's move on.
Thank you. Thank you
We're
very
talking a
much.
lot. Vicky, you have a question?
I have a comment.
Yes, please.
And I've really appreciated all the work you folks have done. This has been a tremendous burden, and thank you for all these
Thank you.
sessions. But I have to point out that what we seem to be concerned about here is not necessarily what we thought we were here for, which was the dollars and the cents, but it's the broader thinking beyond that. And very few people are here, and very few people will see this, especially in regard to planning your rollout, your outreach programs. It seems to me it would really be helpful if there were some kind of a timeline that was written down on paper. What was the efficiency study? Major recommendations? The various kinds of
Stuart, take notes.
action phases that we have to go through. When we discussed earlier the fact that this could be 2 years or more before we get to where decisions have been made. Those points, the issues about the audits, Sally, that required before a referendum, nobody really knows that. I think it's really important to get that
We need
kind
education.
of information out to people so that they understand that the process itself has an awful lot of checks and balances built into it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comment? Yes.
So, somewhere I'm missing a step here, because the Fairweather report discussed a number of different possibilities, right? Consolidation being one of them in both forms, dissolution and coterminous. quite a bit of the report dealt with that. And if I understand correctly, the original scope of the efficiency committee included the concept of shared services. Now, when did that get narrowed to us going for, you know, for a focus on combined budget 2011 for coterminous, and we just kind of left the shared service possibility, which I would contend that a lot of what in terms of work you've done, a lot of it could be addressed by shared services as well.
Well, that's a,
Let me answer this.
okay.
Number one, shared services still are two governments.
Yes,
Okay.
but
So you're making
it's
an
a
assumption, that two governments are desirable. The efficiency committee, made up of and empowered by the village and the town, they're the ones that got the grant, the two governments.
Which
Repres-
grant?
hmm?
Grant for
A
the Fair Weather
$50,000 grant
report? For the Fair Weather report,
to do the study, which is the fair weather study.
yes.
Okay, the process was that two governments, this is before my time, two governments decided they wanted to determine, and if you read it, the grant proposal, the motions before the two boards in their minutes say consolidation, merger, coterminous, shared services. Shared services was not the priority of the study as envisioned by the two governments. They then decided how they were going to create this study committee. The study committee was created. It had two village board members, two citizen members. The town had the same, a college representative in the form of Dr. Benjamin, who is the vice president and director of CREO, and the New Paltz Central School District. Okay, that was the committee. The town was declared the lead agency, okay, by the two governments. They called for requests for qualifications, okay? I do not know how many applications they got to do the study. By the time the efficiency committee was made up and we did the interviewing, the 10 members of the efficiency, they were down to 3 finalists. How that was reduced down to those 3, I don't know, because we did not read all of the, okay. Of those 3, Peter Fairweather Consulting was chosen to do the study. The study was, and I hope my analogy is clear. The study, what Peter and Tim did was they presented all sorts of forms. They did not attempt to do a merged budget. All they did was take the 2 budgets and put them together. Okay? No reductions for duplication for the most part. It was just together. Okay? From my standpoint, and the best way I can describe this to you is the Fairweather Report was a big cookbook. I'm going to have a dinner party. The Efficiency Committee is going to have a dinner party. So we looked at everything, and we really had and they were all open meetings. We really had a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth. Well, if we do this, you know, what does this mean? What's the implication of that? And from that vast, we defined what we believed would be the right form of government, in 10 people's opinions, to propose to the joint boards. We could have proposed a town, we could have proposed dissolving the village, but we knew that in this community, we do not believe that's the appropriate form. We could have recommended dissolving the village in a town form of government, but then you'd really have still two forms of government because you would have to have a fire district. You could not have a volunteer fire department in a town form of government. So all of these things were discussed and designed. Nonpartisan elections. I mean, I don't know whether the joint boards are going to agree with that recommendation, but we, the Efficiency Committee, believes in the best interest of this community and the way we all understand its functioning, nonpartisan elections would be best. Okay? We couldn't agree whether they should be wards or 7 at large.
Now,
Okay.
I haven't seen, was there a final report of the efficiency committee that then launched all the other committees? Is that?
Oh,
what-
so
what
then
happened to this?
Okay,
Yeah.
so then the efficiency, I thought you were, okay, so the efficiency committee made its recommendations to the joint boards.
Okay, is
a
that-
year ago.
Is there a written?
Okay, that was part of the whole fair weather, okay. The one thing that we couldn't do, given what we thought was the best idea for the community, for the town and village to be a community together, we would not have been able to get the $1 million that was out there available for merged and consolidated governments because of what we were proposing. And the New York State finance law did not allow for a coterminous, if you will, because that's what they all call it, but it isn't really coterminous because you're not keeping both governments. You're going to have a village form of government, and one day a year the mayor's going to put on the supervisor's hat and the trustees are going to become town board
But at
members.
that time,
Okay,
that wasn't in the law,
Hmm?
in terms of this aspect.
that kind of money, yeah, for supporting the kind of government that we were proposing was not in the law. Professor Benjamin recommended that the joint boards also resolve to lobby, petition the legislature of the state of New York to amend the finance law that would allow the form of government that we were recommending to be included in the Empowerment Act, eligible for the $1 million.
Now,
That we accomplished.
now there was an understanding that the Empowerment Act also included partial consolidation, such as a consolidation of a sewers consolidation. There's several different aspects to the Citizens Empowerment Act. You're looking at me.
Well, it depends on what you're consolidating. Saugerties Police Department,
There,
town, village police department use the Citizens Empowerment Act to be able, and they got $600,000 from New York State to do it.
yes, I think they were looking at sewers, right?
Oh, some are sewers, some are, you know,
In this case, like, so the Fairweather, report that talked about consolidation of DPW and highway, that was also a possibility within the,
not really because, right now, we share a lot of services. I mean, I believe if you talk with the DPW and with the highway department in the town, you will find that we do share a lot. So, the point, Mike, is we are recommending a consolidated government. Okay, that's the decision, shall we do it or shall we not?
right, but my
Okay.
question was about shared service, where did that get dropped off the line? That was my.
It got dropped off the line when the efficiency committee studied it and it dropped it off the line.
And that was a report, a final report that they made to set off these.
The Fairweather report is the larger report.
Yes.
The efficiency committee within that report made preferred recommendations to the joint boards,
Okay.
okay?
Is that,
That's part of the report, it's an appendix
that's in the
A.
record somewhere
It's appendix A of the report,
of the,
Fairweather report,
okay,
okay?
my copy of the Fairweather report
Bill,
doesn't have that.
just let me clarify one other point. Question of shared services, all right? It's impossible to do any really more shared services. The way that this community, and I realize that you're fairly recent, okay, the way this community has operated, and if you went back 30 or 40 years, okay, they shared a police force. The village decided that they couldn't afford their share of the police force, they turned it over completely to town. The village did it on the youth operation. Originally, the youth operation was joint town and village.
Assessor.
The assessors were joint. Most villages have their own judges. That was eliminated too. Back 60 years ago, I think the town and the village both had judges, all right? All right? So there is, most of what you talk about shared services, okay, you know, have been turned over to the town or the village, all right? Moriello Park is a shared service,
And
but
Camp,
really, the town runs it completely today, all right?
Right, but
and
the Fairweather report discussed DPW being merged, basically, either going by the village taking it totally over, or the town taking it totally over, and it pointed out that it would be more difficult for the town to take it over than the village, but it discussed this at length, this whole
Okay.
possibility of savings
I don't-
going in that direction, and
I don't know what you're,
discussed DPW yet, but it's, you know, it's the largest
okay, Mike, I don't,
item.
I'm not quite following where you're going, but maybe I can
Well, you
clarify,
kind of
excuse me,
answered it,
maybe
right?
I can clarify.
Well,
There-
you answered the question already.
there
which
is-
I just asked where
Okay.
that got dropped off.
It got dropped off when the efficiency committee did its job that it was told to do by the village and town boards together, and that was that we were to study, to look at, and make a
Do
recommendation.
you remember around what time that would be, what time that happened, what, you know, was it a year ago?
Our final report was made October 31st, 2011 to the joint boards. The joint boards convened, I think it was July 17th. Ellen, was it July 17th a year ago that we made the recommendations? That was the big report from Fairweather and also the joint, the recommendations to the joint board. The recommendation to go for an amend was the same time. And there are joint village board, town board minutes that you can look at. Okay, and I suggest you do, because a lot of things were said in that meeting, and votes taken that maybe you should look at. Okay?
All right, okay, yes, question, sir?
Yeah, I have a question. I guess it's in regard to, we come to the conclusion that the village is subsidized by the town for the police department significantly. I mean, in many ways. I mean, besides the fact that the majority of the calls go to the inner village areas, there's also other things involved with, they get the foot patrol, they get the bike patrol. I mean, I live west of Walk Hill. If we were gonna run the stats, on any person here is a village resident, I can guarantee you, a police car is on your street more times in a day than it is mine on a dead-end street all the way west of Walk Hill. So they do get a lot more services in many ways. Now, has the village and the town boards, have they agreed to these business assessment districts not to do it or to do it in regards to lighting and sidewalk? Am I gonna subsidize the village even further with their lighting districts as well as their sidewalk?
Okay, the joint boards haven't really, they are just beginning to discuss the recommendations of the efficiency committee. One of the benefits from the study committees, which came after because people felt that there wasn't enough information, that's how we resolved it, to say whether, financially speaking, is there any indication we should even pursue the issue of consolidation, okay? That we believe the answer is yes, financially. There was a planning committee. The planning committee did not make any recommendations which had any financial impacts on our report. We were the last to report out because other committees reported, and their reports might have had financial implications for us to consider. So the planning report, the village has a planner now. So the idea of having to expend money for a joint master plan, both the village and town are very much in need of a revised master plan. We have a professional planner. That can be done should we choose to consolidate without financial impact, okay? I think you'll see when we get down to later, the way the town operates planning boards and ZBAs is quite different than the way the village does. We have what are called escrow accounts. So engineering complexities, all of those kinds of things are paid for by the developer. They are not paid for by the taxpayer, okay? That's why you see such large differences in the engineering fees, in legal fees, because there are two methodologies in play right now. So, the one area we are very weak on, and we will admit from the Finance Committee, we do not have, except on a best guess, any sense of what will be saved in electricity, consolidating buildings, gas, all of those kinds of things, trucks, going back and forth, all of those kinds of things, because the Facilities Committee, that was their job. Okay, that report is not in. So the Infrastructure Committee, which is one of the things that Paul was asking about, okay, they came up with a recommendation which is far better, and that is the benefit assessment districts that we were talking about. The Efficiency Committee got confused and mixed benefit assessment districts up with special districts. Special districts are a town mechanism, okay? So their report recommends benefit assessment districts except fire, sidewalk, and ambulance, which they believe are community-wide services and should be distributed evenly across the community. But for water and sewer, and those are benefit assessment districts. The business benefit district is not in these figures at all, nor is it even in the scope of the current town board or the current village board. That came out of how, if you're going to consolidate equitably, what is perhaps a fairer way of looking at certain services that not everybody benefits in the same way as other people do. Okay, and that's where but that is not, that's a recommendation to a new government should this community say, yes, we want to consolidate. Does that, did that do it?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to, right now, they have not decided, and.
No, but did I explain, did I answer your
No, I
question?
had two questions. My two questions were, did they, number one, have they decided on the benefit districts in regards to, are they having them or not? They have not, I'm assuming. So, okay, and number two is this Were those numbers put into here, or no, they haven't been addressed yet?
No.
Okay, so those numbers haven't been addressed, okay.
Okay.
But
My thing is, my argument also, if I'm a village resident, we have all these wards and whatnot. You want lighting, I know the town a few years ago was shutting lights up all over the place to save money. What's gonna say they're gonna come in and shut down all the lights off of outside of Main Street, I can see the argument of having lights. I look, when I drive down Main Street, look down all the side roads, see all these lights, I'm like, why are we burning electricity so someone can have, when I walk down my street and I use a flashlight, what's so, difficult about that?
Okay, but please understand, you live in the town lighting districts, no matter where they are paid for in the A fund. They are not benefited assessment districts in the town. All taxpayers in the total town pay for street lighting in the town in special neighborhoods. Okay? So, you have to look at it both sides, always.
Yeah.
Just a brief comment. I appreciate all the work and that's put into this. It just seems almost cart before the horse in the sense that if we don't know what the end is going to look like, how can you give an accurate cost prediction? If there's too many variables on the table, you can't really present, the savings, real savings, or lack thereof. It just seems to me that it's a catch-22 if you don't know, where you're going with all of the details. There seems to be so many details that are variable.
Well, I think
that
that,
cause different prices. So you can't, unfortunately, paint up an accurate picture to the public until you've gone through some kind of real vetting and say, this is what we want, or these three options will cost these amounts with audits.
But that's what we did with the special benefit. That's what the report shows. It shows what the tax savings is without the benefit district. It shows what the tax savings are without that benefit district. The data is there, okay? And that's right to tell you. Now, we didn't discuss any other benefit districts. We didn't study the cost. If you look at this data up here, the water and sewer expenses are not on these charts, all right? We took the water and sewer costs outside that. If you look at the final report, okay, that this committee made, it said this is what the total water and sewer costs will be in the community, and this will be the impact on the rates, okay? It's and I hate to quote it this, but I don't want to. But there is a slight increase in the village and the SUNY rates, like 10%, 11% or something like that. There's about a 20% reduction for the users in the town when you combine it together. But what we have looked at, okay, is basically putting the operations of the town and the village together, and if you merge them, there would be some savings, and that's what we've tried to do. Okay. Now, all of these other things, okay, are all possible things that might be considered in the future. Okay, but those we tried to identify.
What we really need to do is the two joint boards need to decide lots of things, okay? And those become the component and the aspects of the referendum, which then is presented to the town residents and the village resident. Right now, we've just moved from a really macro to somewhat macro. Now it's really got to be refined down so that you know and can argue whether you want nonpartisan elections, whether you want wards, but until the two governments say, yes, we are going to have a village form of government townwide, and that automatically means an appointed village clerk, an appointed DPW. It is our recommendation that we keep both the town and the village, because we've been very lucky in the last 2 years to have really very able people. But they're not elected in a village form of government. In a town form of government, you elect your clerk, you elect, okay? But I think in terms of the educational process, and from the things that I've heard, we need to go back and really educate this community what a town government is, what a village government is. A village has to be a part of a town. It just no choice, okay? So if you don't want to do that, then you could become Highland, which is a unincorporated hamlet within a town, or you can try and design a government that really, hopefully, reflects all of us and makes us all one community and allows us to function in a way that is going to allow people to continue to live here.
Yeah, I'm not challenging the consolidation
Okay,
whatsoever.
but so what you're asking we haven't done yet, and we must do in order for you to sit there and say, I don't like wards, why did you decide that?
Okay, Andrew, yes.
So I'd like to say two things. One comes right off of what you just said. I mean, I know that you guys have been working really hard for a really long time, and I see that for myself as a community resident, I feel like I'm just at the very beginning of, like, I see this as a draft.
It
And
is.
that it needs to be scrutinized and corrected, and the more that you engage the residents in, you know, the more they'll understand, the more questions that'll come up, and the more accurately we can all make decisions together. And the other thing is that, you know, there's a lot of emotional baggage here, because town residents and village residents really feel that they need to protect
Their turf.
their turf, not their turf, and the way that, and to get to the point where we might even think of looking at it as one new Paltz, it's gonna take some work to get there.
But the point is this, and I think that, you know, and I think if we get through this discussion, okay, is that there will be, over time, okay, there'll be, with combined operation, there will be less expense and less people required. And this, we want to try to do it so that there's two ways they're going to happen. If we don't consolidate, some of those reductions are going to take place anyway, and then your services are going down. If we can combine and keep the same service level and still get some of those reductions in personnel and people and cost, okay, then we don't have to operate like the schools in this area have had to operate.
I mean, I would like to have some focus on the other benefits aside from savings, which I really believe are out there. Your issue of time wasted between the two boards is very,
How long do we
very
try to
aware
get
of that.
an agreement between a public access committee, a
Yeah.
contractor? and the
Yes,
town?
you know
I mean,
better
how
than
much time did you
anybody.
spend on that?
You know.
Yeah.
No, how much time how many board meetings and how many discussions and how much work did you spend on that? How did you like to work, just having to go board for just one budget, not two budgets?
Exactly, just one budget versus two.
That's
Can
just
you
one budget?
imagine the town maintains at least, has to, a town A fund general, which is all of us, then a town B, which is outside the village, highway general, which is all of us. I mean, that's 4 levels right there, aside from all their sewer and water and all that other stuff. But Andrew, you said one thing, and I really would just like to, we don't need to refine this. What we need to do is now say, yes, let's move forward, and if that moving forward is agreed upon, get an outside auditor, accountant in here looking at both sets of the books to say, here are the real costs and here are the real savings in the referendum, because that you have to do. And I think we've sort of gotten stuck thinking this is a proposed budget for the new government. It isn't. The only purpose of this, and you know, I know Mike disagrees with me. You know, I don't care if we reduce it by 300,000 because he doesn't agree with me about taking 300,000 out because of the police budget. The point is that this was an exercise, if you will, a long exercise, to show, should we really continue even having the discussion of whether consolidation is a good idea? And there's a lot more to it, as you just pointed out, than just money. There's a lot of stuff involved here, and the discussion needs to be among all of us and not us fighting or saying or nickel and diming each other, or, you know, do we want to be together, and how should we define that in the best interest of all of us? That's where I am. I don't know where other people are, but I mean,
Okay.
Mike, in case you haven't
Stuart, yes.
don't know, I've been in favor of one government for 40 years.
Okay, yes, all right, okay, yes.
I just have a comment about just how you're presenting the budget, that using 2011 as a static point in time,
Yeah.
which I think is exactly what you should be doing. You're creating a point in time to compare two budgets. And I think what a lot of people are struggling with is that it's not about $1.6 million in savings. It's about the assumptions that were used, which I think is what should be discussed, as opposed to whether or not it's 1.6, because you could have used the budgets from 2010, 2009, it does not really matter. And I think people are struggling with this idea that it's about a finite amount of savings. It's not about savings, it's about a point in time where you're just comparing two budgets, because that's the methodology that you use to figure out whether something like this makes sense. And I think you've really struggled with communicating this idea. And Sally, I would suggest not talking about an auditor reviewing these numbers, because that's not what you need. You need an analysis of the two budgets to see if the assumptions make sense.
Well, that's
So
what you use an auditor for.
No, you
Yeah.
don't though. You don't use an auditor. An auditor. would
An
just-
accountant.
No, but you don't use an accountant either. You use someone who performs financial analysis.
Okay.
And I think that's what a lot of people are struggling with.
Okay.
And it's just a lot of, you know, why this makes sense is being lost by people getting confused about, well, we need an accountant to verify these budgets. No, you don't, because the budgets are what they are. They are already audited reports. And it's an illustration. That's what you've provided. And you've created an illustration to say, oh, this makes sense. This is our baseline. This is why we're going to consider moving forward. And I think that's what a lot of people have had a hard time moving past.
Well, let's go through these things, okay? And we hopefully we will get through the rest of it. You know, you can understand, okay? You know, we felt there was a 1.6. When we come out of this analysis, it may be less than that. It
No,
may be more than that. I don't know.
That's the thing. I think your 1.6 is a perfectly fine number to use. The issue is, it's like the assumptions that you use to create the 1.6 are you going to save X number of dollars, you know, buying fewer staplers, or, you know, buying fewer police cars, or whatever it is. That's what should be discussed.
And that will be, that's why we're having 5 sessions.
For example, excuse me, just a thing, okay, and I didn't cover it, and I apologize, okay? One of the things that reason we pulled out as much as we did out of this section, that we did, okay, is because today, the supervisor is the financial officer of the town, okay? When, in the projection of this, the proposal is to put treasurer who has that responsibility.
Which is the difference between town government
Yeah.
and village government. In a village government, the chief budget officer is different than the chief fiscal officer by definition and by law. So they don't wear, the same person can't be in that position of responsibility. In a town form of government, the chief fiscal officer and the chief budget officer rests in the position of supervisor. And so for some of us, we think a checks and balance system is a very, very good idea. And village form of government, I mean, people may argue, I think the village form of government is a far more efficient form of government. A town form of government is very archaic, okay? You can, within then the village, we call it a treasurer, but if we got so enlarged, you could have a comptroller, which is, different, who also could be a personnel director. But right now, in a village form of government, such as we have in New Paltz, you have a treasurer and you have a budget officer, and they are not the same person, okay? And you have, therefore, some financial accountability. I agree with you, I may not be using the right term, whether it's a financial analyst, we call it an accountant, an efficiency expert. It may be that the comptroller would, although I doubt it, would be willing to send a team down. But no matter what, by the time a referendum is presented, you receive a referendum item to vote on. The two governments must have accounted for costs and savings being proposed, and that should be done by an outside agency.
Stuart, yes.
And it's
and
required.
We're adjourned after Stuart's comments.
Stuart Glenn, I with Trustee Bosco are the ones who are given the public outreach for this project, one of the many committees. And this is the first informational meeting, and there'll be several others. You can read about them in the paper. One of the complaints so far during this whole process, which has been going on for more than 2 years, is that the public hasn't been engaged in it. Well, that's not exactly true. The meetings were all open to the public. And the outreach people couldn't really get going until now. Now we have some concrete information, so you'll start seeing things. You'll see there's a column in the New Paltz Times each week about what the meetings will be, and information will be passed on, and hopefully the other newspapers will do the same. You're going to start seeing some things on Channel 23 about explaining things. We've had a couple of problems with outreach so far. One is we didn't have something specific to say to the public. Another problem we've had is that the town and the village websites were in bad shape. That's being solved. We now have information that's coming out on, at least on the village Facebook page. We have now started a new system in the village with Google Docs, and you're going to find all of the documents online so that you can address them in full. There's a Gmail address that you'll see in the paper, and you'll see on Channel 23. If you have questions, you can email them, and they'll be forwarded to the members of that particular committee who dealt with that to answer them for you. You're encouraged to come to these meetings. I hope more people will come down. As far as meetings go, tomorrow night here at 7 o'clock. If you want to stay till tomorrow, I'll give you a sleep bag. But we'll be here tomorrow night to talk about outreach now that we have some real things to get into. And by the way, as we've said at every meeting, everyone is encouraged to come to those meetings and to help. We have a lot of talent out there, and a lot of that talent has been critiquing this, which is good. But it would be nice if some of that talent will come down to the table and help us solve it, because we're all trying to do the same thing, is make ourselves more efficient. because in these economic times, whether we do this or we don't do this, we're faced with some serious problems. So hopefully this will make it easier on the voters to do. So please stay tuned and try to keep a positive attitude about this. There's been a lot of questions asked. In the governmental system, it takes a while for those to get out, but it's our intent to answer every one of those questions that you ask, and if you don't like the answer, you can write back and we'll get to the details. There's no one trying to fool anybody or hide anything under the carpet or anything. We're all anxious to get answers to everything because I think all of us want to make this, a positive experience. So you will see the answers to those questions. There's other questions and answers that the Outreach Committee's been working on for a while that you'll see posted up there. If you have other ideas of how, and we have several ones that we're going to discuss tomorrow that people in the community have brought up, how we can get the word out better. We'll be discussing those tomorrow. But if you have brilliant ideas, boy, we'd sure like to hear about them. And, we could use your help. So,
Stuart, why don't you point out that these two sheets are on the village website, right on the front homepage.
Right, we have, thank you. There are certain documents that we were able to get onto the website, including these. I think when we get the new system, it'll be easier to find things. At least that's our hope.
Yeah, we will be going from the auditor down through building contractual on building contractual. Is that right? Yeah, I think.
I thought you were further up, because we have 5. Yeah.
Down through here, yeah.
The other thing, I agree, I did want to emphasize and reinforce what Stuart said, but I also want to say there is no question that isn't worth an answer. And sometimes people say, well, I don't want to ask what's the difference between something as simple as the town and village form of government is, because people will think I should know these things, and that's not true. And there is a big difference between the two forms of government, so there is no question that is too silly or too elementary to ask. And if you noticed, Mike, this is on the website, but now it's all been consolidated. The report has been consolidated into one document, and hopefully all of the reports.
Just on the village website this morning, but no, actually tonight, and it's still all the.
No, Katie.
All the financial committee reports are on that whole page.
Yeah, but it's in one sort of one document.
No, it's all. Right before I came here, I printed out some.
Is it still all spread out?
Well, it's each.
Yeah.
It's a link to each report. It's not the worst of things.
Well, it was supposed to all be, so you could just go find the financial report, hit it, and all the reports would show, and then planning, all the reports. Now, if you have technology questions, don't even bother asking me. I am not.
I want to thank
at
everybody.
all.
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I really appreciate it. And I hope that you come next week.
The last thing I'd like to say is, as important as the financial part of this is, and it is, and please ask all your questions, the governance part is equally as important. And there will be other sessions. We got into pieces of that tonight. And if you don't think that's a serious problem, then just sit in on a couple of these joint board meetings when we're dealing with a municipal, intermunicipal agreement. So your questions don't have to be only financial questions. Any questions about this at all, and we'll get you the answer.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
While we're on reasonably good terms, let me point out,